American League West. Who has the best offseason in this division? It's hard to recap the Mariners. How many trades did Jerry Dipoto make this year? 4, 5, 6? I mean, a lot of moving of parts there. We already said you kind of set the Athletics aside. The Angels, another team we can kind of just set aside. They're in a weird spot, trying to deal with the loss of Shohei Ohtani and trying to give Mike Trout some type of a contender around him without really doing much to improve things. It comes down to those top three teams, though. So it's the Mariners that made a ton of trades. The Rangers, what did the Rangers do? Let's actually start there. I'm trying to
Yeah,
even
that's
think. Uh,
well,
I mean,
that's where you go. You got to figure out how much credit do you want to give him for Wyatt Langford? Where because really that's Wyatt Langford forcing the Rangers' hand more than anything. I don't know that the Rangers were expecting him to slot into their outfield and say, oh man, that's going to make us better. If he does, great. That's a maybe a good problem for lack of a better term. But yeah, I don't think they were necessarily counting on that. So we probably shouldn't give them any credit for that. You like they were able to pick up David Robertson for the back of the bullpen,
yeah,
along with Kirby Yates. They a couple, non-roster guys, and Jose Urena is going to make the team, out of camp. Tyler Mahle, which he's coming back from Tommy John surgery, so you're not going to really get anything out of him. Maybe late in the year. But yeah, they were kind of quieter overall. Maybe Jared Walsh can get back to being an all-star in a Rangers uniform. Should he make the team as a non-roster invite? But they were kind of more quiet and more subdued. I think similar to some other teams, they kind of made their off-season transactions at the trade deadline in 2023.
I think my big problem is actually the Mahle edition because you already had this situation with Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom where you're waiting. And I don't understand in a market where a lot of flyers were taken, why they couldn't take a flyer on a guy that would pitch in the first half. Tyler Mahle might be great again when he comes off Tommy John, and it could be a fantastic addition for the playoffs in the 2025 season. But to me, not addressing the loss of Jordan Montgomery at all, really, for the first half, I think it could cripple him this season. I know one of our new writers, Wes Jones, wrote up a piece about the history of World Series winners, and it's not very good. A lot of these teams, I don't have the exact stat in front of me. I think it was something like 9 of the last 20 World Series, or only 9 of the last 20 even made the playoffs. I'll try to pull it up, but the point is the odds are kind of against them in history here. And to see them just not address that glaring hole to me was the biggest mistake, I think, in this division, just not doing anything to address it.
Yeah, West does a wonderful job covering the Rangers. The back to the Mahle business, they're paying him $22 million for 2 years. So it's more about getting him right this year after Tommy John, and then you save some money and next year for a guy that could end up being really strong for you. But the Rockies only paid $20 million in a nearly identical situation for Herman Marquez. So and he's been way better than Tyler Mahle.
Yeah.
Go and look at the numbers. Even at Coors Field, Marquez is way better. So you're right. I think they needed to probably improve that depth, and there's still guys in that rotation, and you saw them have to dip into those players during the World Series, whether it was John Gray, Andrew Heaney, Dane Dunning. But I think you're right. There's too many question marks between DeGrom and Max Scherzer, and now adding Mahle to that mix. What are you really getting for your buck in 2024, which is what we're talking about? That was a real questionable transaction.
It was, and it just leaves me looking at them and saying it was a bad offseason in my eyes. I know again, I guess we can grade everything on a curve, and you can say, well, they didn't need to do much. They still have a team that doesn't have a lot of holes. But even hearing that they were in the mix on Dylan Cease and couldn't get that across the finish line when they have a farm system that's right there with San Diego's. I would have liked to see them push the chips forward and make that trade because that would have made them a lot better in the first half. So I'm definitely not calling them the best the best offseason in this division. To me, it comes down to Houston and Seattle. Houston made one move, really, but it's a really good move. Josh Hader in that bullpen with again, we're kind of looking at based on what they had. That was not even necessarily a need. I don't know if you even call it one, but they identified a player that is going to make them so much better this year, I think. So to me, that one addition might be enough.
Yeah, I think so. Like it's not as big of a conversation or in depth. Like you said, it's down to one guy. So it seems like it's hard to say that one team did the best in the division when they only added one player. You know, they didn't really lose very much, a couple uh, relievers. But you know that was a huge pickup. Anytime you can get the best player at their position, like head and shoulders above the rest, and you're in that window where you can go out and win a World Series, that's huge. That's important. Seattle, on the other hand, it was more, I think, quantity, right? You got the Jorge Polanco deal, Jake Fraley, you know, maybe you catch lightning in a bottle with him off the bench as kind of a fourth outfielder type. Mitch Haniger's back in Seattle. They got Mitch Garver, you know, to do some catching from the World Series winning Texas Rangers last year. So it was more quantity than anything, and that's positive. But because it's Seattle and because of all the different trades and stuff they made, you know, whether you know Jorge Polanco's name or not, just plugging and placing a bunch of different guys into a new setting doesn't necessarily guarantee you a certain, you know, level of success. So the name doesn't matter quite as much. I'm kind of almost inclined to give it to the Astros because of that one slam dunk move. Give it to the quality over the quantity in the Mariners.
Yeah, the Mariners did their typical roster churn, and I
Right.
mean, like Jose Rojas, I can't remember if that was this offseason at the deadline. It's the hardest team to follow in baseball, trying to see how they move all these pieces around. Dominic Canzone's going to be in the outfield. Luke Raley, like you mentioned there, like they did a lot, and in some respects, I guess if you were to plot it all out and say they made this volume of moves that made them this much better, but they traded Eugenio Suarez, who didn't have the best year last year, but the year prior was fantastic for them at third base and gave them a really good defender there and always gave them some pop in that lineup. So they did a lot of adding, they did a lot of subtracting. I do love that they picked up Ryan Stanek at the end of this offseason. That's a really nice move. But right now, after the Hader acquisition, I'm looking at the Astros as a clear favorite in this division, and because of it, I think they had the best offseason.
Yeah, I think there may end up being 10 players that the Mariners picked up during the offseason that are going to be on their opening day roster. And, you know, we mentioned several of those guys. You know, Luis Arias, you know, it might be pretty good for them, again, coming off the bench. He's still young. He seems like he's been around forever, but he's still a young utility infield type. So you got 10 versus one, and it seems like it shouldn't be any contest, but going back to the context, you know, the Mariners do this each and every year. And so um they also don't have that track record that Tampa Bay does, where you with Tampa, you can trust that you're going to pick up a guy like a Tyson Miller, Cody Bolton, Austin Voth. Those are three guys the Mariners picked up. Are they going to be okay in that bullpen? You know, in Tampa, they usually get those guys figured out and on the right path. Seattle, they don't have that track record to say, hey, that injection of some new blood is probably going to play out well for them. That hasn't really been the case in the Jerry Dipoto era. So it's kind of for that reason to go with the safe bet and in Josh Hader. But you know, could some of those 10 players really pan out for Seattle in a big way? Absolutely. But I'll go safe and say Astros did have the best offseason because of the Josh Hader signing.
I'm sure that if there's any Mariners fan watching this, they're going to be completely outraged. And they're like, what are you talking about? We got so much better. And I'm sure they love all these different trades that were made. But ultimately, I'm not looking at a Mariners team that I say is significantly better than last year. I think what will make them better is just the fact that their rotation's awesome and they have the best young player in baseball, and they could make a ton of noise this year,
Right.
like we've already alluded to. Josh Hader in that bullpen, Brian Abreu, Ryan Presley. Good luck late in games facing the Astros when they have a lead. So, Astros with the best offseason in the AL West.